Hi, and welcome to my section of our pensions webinar called All Change, the New Pensions Allowances. I'm Charlene Young, pensions and savings expert here at AJ Bell, and it's my pleasure to be with you today. So just starting off with what I want to cover in our 15 to 20 minutes that we've got for my section. So I'm going to go through the three new allowances, what counts towards them, when your allowances might be different, and ultimately who could benefit from your pension. So for most people, the earliest you can access your pension is currently age 55. But this is going up to age 57 on the 6th of April 2028. Today, though, as I say, is all about those new allowances that came in on the 6th of April, when we said a goodbye of sorts to the old lifetime allowance. So when the lifetime allowance was finally abolished on the 6th of April this year, we were given three new allowances to work with. So these allowances, which I'll go through in turn in a second, are the allowances for most people. If you've got protection from the old lifetime allowance, or you've already started to access your pension under the old rules, you might have more or less than these amounts left. So first up, we've got the lump sum allowance, and that's set at £268,275. Second up, we've got a new allowance called the lump sum and death benefit allowance, set at £1,073,100. And finally, something to be aware of for people who are considering transferring their pension to retire overseas, there's an overseas transfer allowance of the same level. Now, today, I'm going to concentrate on number one and number two, which, as per the name, you can see are all about lump sums. So just a few things to kind of point out. You'll still, under the new allowance rules, usually be able to take up to 25% of your pension pots tax-free. That tax-free amount that you take will then be measured against these allowances. So I'm going to give you some examples of tax-free amounts and what might count towards those lump sum allowances. So my first group is tax-free cash. So tax-free cash or pension commencement lump sum is that lump sum that's paid to you when you move a pension into drawdown or you use it to buy an annuity, a pension for life. Secondly, we've got the tax-free part of a pension lump sum. Now, pension lump sums are the name we give to the official lump sum called the uncrystallised funds pension lump sum. Now, it's a horrible jargony term that we were given by the government. So at AJ Bell, we try and keep it a little more simple and refer to them as pension lump sums, where you get 25% of the lump sum tax-free and the rest is taxable. So what counts towards these lump sum allowances is that tax-free. I've got a second group here of other tax-free lump sums that might count towards some allowances. So tax-free lump sums paid to you if you're terminally ill. So this is known as a serious ill health lump sum, and that's paid to people who are sadly given less than 12 months to live. And finally, there are also tax-free lump sums that can be paid if you die before the age of 75. Hopefully on the next slide, though, it'll become clearer why I've kind of split it into those two groups. So here, looking at what counts to each of those new lump sum allowances in a bit more detail. So the lump sum allowance first, what counts towards that? Well, it's the whole of any tax-free cash or that pension commencement lump sum that we talked about before. And it's the tax-free part, so that 25% of a pension lump sum. So if you go over that lump sum allowance in your lifetime, there will be tax to pay on the excess, and that tax will be yours to pay. Let's move on to the lump sum and death benefit allowance. So the same two things count towards this one. So the whole of a tax-free cash lump sum or the tax-free part of a pension lump sum, plus those two extra types of tax-free lump sums. So any serious ill health lump sum and any tax-free lump sums that are paid to your beneficiaries. So a slight difference there in terms of how the income tax might apply if you did go over any of those allowances. So a lump sum could also take you over that lump sum and death benefit allowance in your lifetime. For example, if you are paid all of your fund as a serious ill health lump sum and it's above that figure, so any excess here would be taxable on you. But also the pot that's measured against the death allowance, if your beneficiary chooses a lump sum, so a tax-free lump sum, there's no measurement against this allowance if your beneficiary went on to choose to take any death benefits as income. So it's important to kind of have that distinction. Okay, so just moving on to when your allowances could be different. So there's three main reasons that you might have a higher or a lower lump sum allowance. For example, if you've got protection from the old lifetime allowances, your allowances will start from higher amounts. Secondly, if you'd already accessed a pension before the new rules came in on the 6th of April this year, you'll need to do a calculation to work out how much of the new allowances you have left. And then lastly, if you've previously accessed a pension, but you didn't for some reason take 25% as tax-free cash, you might be able to apply for more tax-free cash. Okay, so we've got lots more information about these allowances and some of those sort of points where your allowances might be different to the standards on our website. So I've put the link in the bottom there, but you can also go to our website and search for lump sum allowance, for instance. So that's just to give you an idea of kind of what that first page on lump sum allowance looks like. And here is what the final section of that page looks like, where it kind of expands on those three things I've talked about. So if you think any of these might apply to you, just click that red plus sign and it expands with a little bit more information. Now, a quick word on that third and final point where I talked about how you might be able to apply for more tax-free cash. Just be really careful on that because it can get very complex. And in some cases, applying to get more tax-free cash could actually put you in a worse position. So it's definitely an area where specialist advice would really be needed. Okay, so that was our whistle-stop tour of those new allowances. I also promised you that I'd have a quick word on what happens to pension pots when people pass away. Now, it's something we're going to cover in a bit more detail in our pension Q&A session as well. So not a cheery subject, but something that's really frequently asked of our customer services teams. And the ability to pass on personal pensions like SIPs over generations is a really useful tax planning point for some people. So first up, again, it's just kind of signposting some content that we've got available on our website. I just wanted to signpost this article called "What Happens to My Pension When I Die?" I'm going to look at who can benefit, so beneficiaries, in my final slides now in a bit more detail. But if that leaves you kind of wanting to know a little bit more, check out this full article and the Q&A between Rachel and myself at the end of this webinar, as we'll go into a bit more detail there. So who can benefit from your pension? Well, let's start with you as the member. And you'll see here there's potentially quite a lot of people. So a spouse or sibling partner could benefit. You could nominate children, you could nominate grandchildren, and you can actually nominate anyone you like. So we've got, it's kind of a drinking pal there just to kind of to show you, in terms of who can benefit. There's quite a wide range of people or individuals, but you can also nominate entities, so things like trusts or charities as well. So it's really quite flexible in terms of who or what you might choose to benefit from your pension. So kind of looking at the three main types of beneficiaries that you might see noted. First up is a dependent. So this is kind of the classic ones when it goes back to pensions of all types. So your spouse or civil partner is classed as a dependent, as is any child under 23. Now, older children above 23 can also be classed as dependent due to physical or mental impairments. And so can anyone who's financially dependent on the person whose pension scheme it is. And again, if you're in what is called in the legislation, financial relationship of mutual dependence. So you'll find in a lot of cases, it might be up to your pension provider to determine, or they might ask your the people managing your estate for a bit more information, just to work out who exactly is dependent, especially on those last two ones, if there is a relationship of financial dependence. So anyone you also nominate is known as a nominee. And again, that can be any of those people in that slide that we looked at. So whereas your spouse or civil partner will always be a dependent, anyone else basically could also be a nominee. So children, grandchildren. And then finally, you might hear of something called a successor. Now, this is actually someone who can benefit from a pot that has already been left to a beneficiary. So for instance, if your pot had been left to one of your children, it's then on their death, they could nominate someone to receive anything that's left in that beneficiary pot, and that person is known as a successor. So that's really something kind of for beneficiaries to worry about rather than the original pension scheme member. So just to kind of summarize who can benefit from your pension, because it's been a very high level sort of summary that I've done here. I could go into lots of different details on all the kind of tax rules and things, but I just don't have time for my slot today. But you can effectively nominate whoever you like. So that could be an adult, a child, a friend, a trust, or a charity. An important point to note, and something that I'll cover with Rachel in the Q&A, is that your beneficiaries actually choose the form of death benefits they take from your pot. So they could choose potentially to take a lump sum, or they could choose to use the pot to provide them with an income. So that's one thing that sometimes comes up. People think that whilst they can choose who might be able to benefit from their pot, it's actually the beneficiary who chooses the kind of shape of their income or lump sum. It's really important to keep your nominations up to date, just so your scheme, so for example, us at AJ Bell, we have a really good full picture of your wishes, because pensions aren't normally part of your estate, so they wouldn't be governed by your will. So please do, any pensions that you do have, make sure you've kept your wishes and your nominations up to date with whoever your provider is. And then finally, just something here, you might want to consider non-taxpayers as beneficiaries if that's appropriate for your situation. Now, I mentioned that page, that article on our website. That's where we go into a little bit more detail on the rules, and there's a really handy tax planning case study at the end. If that's your kind of thing and you're thinking about pensions as a wider part of leaving some of your pensions, a wider part of a tax planning strategy. Okay, so all that leaves me to say is like really big thank you for watching. I hope that was useful. I know it was quite a high level run through of those new allowances, but I'll see you at the end of this webinar for a Q&A where Rachel and I are going to answer some of your big pensions questions.